we were talking about breach of contract. And it is totally undebated among economists, at least. Among economists, it is undebated that if between the formation of a contract and its performance, the total surplus disappears from the contract. Consumer surplus plus producer surplus. If it, for whatever reason, totally disappears, if the resource goes somewhere else, then the resource should go somewhere else. And that should lead to a termination of a contract. Now there are two different schools, however. Both agree that the contract, that at the end of the day, there should be no contract anymore. The contract should be avoided. But there are two schools. One school is the school of efficient breach, which says that this goal can be achieved by damage compensation. The other school questions this. That is the school of specific performance. And the school of specific performance says, no, this is a forced transaction in a way. It is not voluntary, and the damage compensation cannot guarantee that the full damage is paid, because much of the damage is sentimental or whatever, and it is not covered by damage compensation. And therefore, this rule the rule of efficient breach does not guarantee that actually the resource goes to the highest valued user, right? So this, for instance, this argument plays a huge role worldwide now on this question of land grabbing and taking and fair compensation for taking. Because often in many countries, I was just in Korea, gave a talk on taking law, they have a huge discussion and say, well, even if the government pays the full value of the land, then this full value does not include the sentimental value of residents who lose their neighbors, their friends, and they must go somewhere else and so on. It is not guaranteed that the full market value leads to the land, to a better use of the land. And this is the same argument here. So what we can say is that it is of course more or less trivial that that reliance, that compensation for the reliance damages does not guarantee that a breach is efficient. If, however, the expectation damages consist all expectations, then efficient breach would be it would lead to an efficient solution. However, this is questioned because it is argued that often this does not include parts of the valuation of a person which, however, are not covered by the damage compensation of a legal system. And I give you now two cases, one famous case from the American legal history and one case from Germany, which illustrates this and which are both support in some way the view that specific performance should be the remedy for breach of contract. The first case is the case Jacobs versus Young. Now, Jacobs was a man who, and Young was a construction company, and Jacob ordered a house from a construction company. And they made a very detailed contract, how the house looked like and so on, and the construction company agreed to this, and so the house was then delivered at one point of time, and Jacob got the house. Now in the contract, Jacob had specified that the water pipes in the house should be made of copper, high quality, to keep the water, to have a good quality water. But that was not the only thing what was in the contract. He wanted copper pipes of a particular brand, namely Reading Manufactures, which was the gold standard at the time of copper production. Reading manufacture coppers. Now when the construction firm, when it came to when the pipes were fixed in the house, it turned out that the Reading manufacture copper pipes were not available. They were not on the market. They could not get them. And therefore the construction firm simply decided to take other pipes from another good brand, also of copper, and used these ones. And when the house was ready, Jacob noticed this, that contrary to the contract, they had not used Reading manufactures, but another copper. And Jacobs then asked the construction firm to replace the copper pipes and replace them by the existing ones and replace them by Reading manufacture. Okay, this is not such a problem. Now comes the problem. To make this happen, the construction firm would have to tear down parts of the house, several walls and so on. It was huge cost. And still, Jacob insisted. He said, why the hell? We have a contract. He is one of those particular persons who are very particular about what they have in their house and so on. Not all people are so, but among 100 you find one who is and he wanted this. He wanted these Reading manufacture pipes. And the firm said, no, this is simply that we cannot do this. We are not willing to do this because you got copper pipes and these pipes are as good as the Reading manufacturer and so on. So he went to court and he moved the case up to the Supreme Court. So it's a Supreme Court case. Now the Supreme Court, with majority, there was a dissenting opinion of the famous Judge Cardozo. But the majority said that in this case, Jacob is only entitled to damage compensation. He has no right of performance, that would overdo the obligations from a contract. He can only claim damages, and the damage compensation to which he is entitled is the difference between the value of the house with the Reading manufacture coppers and the value of the house with the copper pipes which are actually in the house. And this difference is 0. So he gets nothing. Now, is this efficient? Is it fair? It is obvious that here the Supreme Court did not protect the sentimental value of Jacob, right? And that is somewhat questionable, one can say. Because obviously, and I do not know all the details of the case, but one colleague once told me that Jacob was somehow related to this family, Reading, which produced Reading manufacturers, and that was the reason why he also wanted Reading manufacture. And that was all totally disregarded by the court. And this led to a huge discussion among lawyers and lawyer economists also. I think there are hundreds of articles have been published, if not thousands, more than 1,000, only on this case. Also, Tom Hewlin has written an article on that. And they said, you have here to give a right of specific performance, because otherwise you do not protect a valuation which exists and which is totally neglected by the legal system, right? On the other hand, that was my view. I'm not so sure that the decision was wrong. You see, the problem here was that Jacob could here engage, that Jacob not only demanded the copper to be replaced, that would have, but he could put the other side in a hold-up position. He was in a hold-up position because they could do this only if, let's say, if they tear down half of the house. Huge costs, in addition to the replacement cost. And then you can, of course, extract profits from the other side if you are in that hold-up position. You pretend that, you know, this is very important for me, but then you could say, well, you know, but if you give me $20,000, then you, or $50,000, then you still make a gain, you know. And this is also problematic because these costs are then spread among all others. You know, if we had such strict rules, then the level of care which is induced by this goes up dramatically and pushes up the cost of production. And these costs of production, however, are not borne only by those who have these special, very seldom wishes, but they are spread around on the prices for all others. And that might be a reason to argue that the decision of the Supreme Court here, the majority decision, was not that unwise as many people say. See what I mean? That is the case for specific performance. And we have a similar case in Germany that was about 20 years ago. That was the time when car manufacturers started to install into their cars catalytic converters. You know what a catalytic converter is? Yeah, they reduce pollution tremendously. The pollution of the car, you know, what comes out of the car goes down by 80, 90, 70, 80, 90, 95% by the catalytic converter. Now the problem here was the following. We had negotiations between the countries of the EU countries, the 27 EU countries, and to, to introduce a general catalytic converter for the whole EU. And of course, the rich countries like Germany, they wanted catalytic converters which were very strong, but also more expensive. And the poorer countries like Portugal or Greece, they wanted catalytic converters which were cheaper but also less effective. Now, for instance, assume that a country like India and Germany would have to agree on catalytic converters. You can easily see the difference in interest there, that the Germans would have much higher standards probably than the Indians, because it is, given the average income, you know, it makes a big difference if you pay for a car, let's say 2,000 euros more or less, right? So that was the situation. So these negotiations broke down, and then Germany came up with its own law. It made a national regulation for converters. So this law was then announced and passed, and Mercedes then advertised that they would now offer the new Mercedes car with these catalytic converters according to the German standards, which was a very high standard. And they advertised this, and somebody bought this car, which could not be delivered at once, but only after half a year. So he had to wait for 6 months for the delivery of the car. Now, in the meantime, between contract formation and delivery, the legal situation changed, because unexpectedly the European countries, the EU countries, agreed on a joint catalytic converter for all countries. And that, of course, annihilated the national German law, and the German law was replaced by a European regulatory law for catalytic converters. And of course, Mercedes company now installed this instead of the, you know, higher valued catalytic converter which they had announced, which they had advertised. So they delivered the car, and then there was one owner of the car, one buyer. He said, no, you know, I have a contract, and it is clear from the contract that I'm entitled to the, not to the EU standard catalytic converter, but to the standard which Mercedes-Benz has advertised. They have a contract. And they didn't, however, Mercedes did not pay or did not do this, and then he went to court, and that was also moved to the Supreme Court, the case. And Mercedes argued, they said, look, we have this catalytic converter, which the buyer wants, only as a blueprint. It exists only as a blueprint. So we would have to produce one piece instead of many thousand, million, hundreds of thousands. And to produce one piece would cost us 250,000 Deutschmarks. You know, that would be 125,000 euros. And that is not acceptable for us. You see? It's a similar case like this Jacob versus Young case. But he insisted. And the Supreme Court said, well, you must produce this one thing. So they sticked to the specific performance rule. I don't know what the end was of that, but I could imagine your 125,000 euros. That is the price of 3 or more new Mercedes cars. Huh? So they might have said, okay, you keep this car, and after 5 years you get another new car, and after 5 years you get another new car for free, and that is still cheaper, you know. Probably they did not do this, but you see that again he was in a, you don't know whether he was really, let's say, a green activist who wanted to make a point here, you know, in being the one who has the best catalytic converter, or whether he just wanted to use his hold-up position. That is the problem here. But all in all, one can say this. I think on theoretical grounds, one cannot say whether the rule of specific performance or the rule of expectation damages for breach of contract is economically the best rule. There are, of course you can make a model, and then in the model, according to parameters, sometimes this is the best rule and sometimes this is the best rule. But one thing is quite remarkable. There is now also some empirical literature on how important this the specific performance still is. And there is no doubt that the importance of specific performance, even in countries where specific performance is the rule, like in Germany, is going down. That when there is breach of contract, then the parties often agree, or the affected party who suffers from the breach often agrees to damage compensation. And that is a sign that damage compensation is not so bad in comparison to specific performance, because specific performance simply dies out. My colleague Henrik Lando, who is a professor of law and economics at the Copenhagen Business School, he has searched about this in Denmark. And he told me that the last case in which specific performance was used in the Supreme Court of Denmark was in the year 1915. So 100 years ago, 101 years ago. And also in Germany, I think the importance is going down. Of course, in countries, in socialist countries, for instance, specific performance plays a much bigger role. That went so far that even, in the times of communism, the lawyers, contract lawyers from East Germany and from the Soviet Union and so on, they wrote articles and said that damage compensation is the contract law of capitalist countries, and specific performance is the contract law of socialist countries. But this is the reason for that are not so flattering for them, because now assume, for instance, that you lived in such a society like East Germany or Soviet Union, in which everything runs on queues. There are no markets, no real markets, right? And money has no meaning, because you have the money but you cannot buy. There's this joke that somebody goes to in Moscow, in the Soviet times, goes to this famous magazine store, GUM, and he wants a coat. And then he goes to the department store and asks a salesperson, where are the coats? And the salesperson answers, well, here we have no shoes. No coats are on the second floor. Now, if you are in such a situation, then when you have money but not the goods, then of course you are interested in specific performance. So for instance, if you buy a car and have to wait 10 years for a car, and then it is not delivered, then if they give you the money back or something, or some damage compensation, that is really not what you want. You want the car, right? Whereas in a country where money really has a meaning, then you can say, okay, give me the money, then I can buy another car, you see. And now, also in China, that is quite interesting. In China, they had a reform of the civil code recently, a couple of years ago, in which they introduced damage compensation in contract law, you know, which shows that they are also moving into this direction. Okay. Now my next point here is the so-called foreseeability doctrine, the Hadley versus Baxendale case, and I want first to elaborate on the rule and why it is so specific, and then make an economic analysis of the rule. You know, usually if somebody is entitled to damage compensation, then the damage compensation is calculated according to a formula which we call the differential principle. The differential principle, that is the formula for calculating a damage award. Now, what does it mean? Now, assume somebody suffers from a damage. So, for instance, because he suffers from an accident, for instance. Then the damage compensation is the difference between the wealth he would have had if those events which led to the damage claim would not have happened, and the wealth he actually has. This difference between this hypothetical situation which would have occurred if those events which led to the damage award would not have happened, and his actual wealth. This is the difference principle. And therefore, a damage award is always a full damage award. Usually there are exceptions, but basically it's a full damage award. Now, for instance, assume that that somebody badly hits a pedestrian with his car. Then the damage, and that is one person is badly hit, must go to hospital and so on, loses his income for a couple of months and has huge losses and so on. Then the damage compensation is not in any way, let's say, truncated or so. Now assume that this guy is a student with no income, with a low income, then the damage compensation is low according to the difference principle. But now assume that he's a famous football player with an income of 2 million or something like that, then the damage compensation would be 2 million, right? I will come later to the rationale why that is so in tort law, and that this gives the right incentives. But that is usually the case. And that is the case in tort law, but it is also the case in contract law, or in Germany, but not in common law countries. In common law countries, this damage compensation in contract is truncated at a kind of foreseeable level. Is that also the case in India? Can you tell? This Hadley-Baxendale rule, does that apply? Pardon?
You don't apply that.
You don't apply?
I have not seen that.
Uh-huh. Does anyone, have you ever heard of it? Yeah? Yeah, that is a different thing. The remote damages, that is a question of causation, to which we will still come. That applies for tort law also. But here in in contract law, the damage paid is often not the full damage, but if the damage is very high, then it is truncated at some point. Pardon? Reasonable damages. No, but
We have this in the context of the Motor Vehicle Act. So what the act says is that if a person, if there's an accident and you have to award damages, then that will be linked to the victim's economic value. For instance, if the victim was in a certain job,
yeah,
then you will extend his employment period for the remaining part of his life, multiply it with his expected income, and award. So I don't think we calculate
uh-huh.
compensation. So what we do is we take the full economic value of the person's life and then.
I see. So perhaps this is, I included this here because I thought that as you have the English contract law, you would also apply this rule. But doesn't matter. I will explain it to you, and then there is an economic problem behind it, whether you use this rule or whether you do not use this rule. And it is more important to understand the economic problem. Now, I give you the original case. Well, Hadley was, in the 19th century, a miller who owned a mill. And the mill was, that was still a windmill. In the 19th century, they had windmills in England. And one of the shafts of his windmill was broken, and he brought the shaft to a blacksmith in his village or in this little city where he lived to fix it. Now the problem was then that the mill, that to fix it, the blacksmith had to order a particular gadget or a particular piece to be fixed at this shaft. And that took him 2 weeks or so to get. So instead of repairing this within a day or two, it took 3 weeks to be repaired. After 3 weeks it was repaired, and because of the delay, because of the delay, Hadley was entitled to damage compensation. It was regarded as a breach of contract, which leads to damage compensation. And now comes the problem. The damage in this particular case was unusually high because it had happened in the peak season of, just when, at the time when all the farmers came with their grain to be grinded. And this miller, he made most of his turnover, of his yearly turnover, within a couple of weeks, and it was in these weeks that this happened. So let's say instead of paying £100, they had to. The damage was now £1,000 or more. And here the House of Lords, which had to decide the case, said, well, that was from the point of view of the blacksmith. This damage was totally unexpected. He, when he deals with the whole thing and thinks, how can I fix this? What can I do to speed things up? Then, of course, the question of damage compensation comes into his mind. But it comes not into his mind that the damage is so extraordinarily high, much higher than he thinks. And therefore, the court decided that in this case, but also in future cases, the damage is truncated, the damage compensation truncated at a level which is which equals, let's say, the normal level, you know, the damage which are normal, but not the excessively high damage are not compensated in contract law. In tort law, excessively high damages are compensated. So if you by chance hit with your car, let's say, Bill Gates, then that you cannot say, well, this is excessively high damage. You have to pay it. But in contract law, the rule is in English law is different. So, what is the rationale for this? What is the rationale? The economic rationale. Could you think of one?
The damages are so high that that Hadley could have bought another shaft in so much of rupee or whatever. Then it is I mean it is very foolish for him to not do that and instead go for repairing it.
Yeah, right. But you know, with this high damage, without this rule, Baxendale, the miller, without this rule, he can simply go and say, look, here I have this shaft, repair it, doesn't sell anything. But if we have this rule, then his incentives are different. Then he must think, well, if there is a breach of contract, if there is a delay, then I'm only entitled to, here in this case, a relatively small part of my damage. Therefore, I will disclose that I'm a high damage type. So it is an information generating rule. It generates information. So in that case, the consequence would then be that Hadley goes, Baxendale, the miller, goes to Hadley and says, look, I want this to be repaired, but I must tell you, do it as quickly as possible within 3 days. I want this in the contract, and if not, you must know that my damages are very, very high. And if you know it, then this rule does not apply. But then Hadley can say, wait a moment, you know, my usual bill for this is, let's say, £100. But, you know, with this high risk, I can do it only for £200. So then this high damage compensation becomes ex ante part of the price of the. So it is a rule which generates information. You see what I mean? And therefore it is an efficient rule.
I think this rule.
Pardon?
I think this rule is actually in Indian law. So there is section 73 of the Indian contract essence of time. The point is, so section 73 continues.
Yeah, can you read?
So it says, when a contract has been broken, the party who suffers by such breach is entitled to receive from the party who has broken the contract compensation for any loss or damage caused to him thereby, which naturally arose in the usual course of things from such breach, on which the parties knew when they made the contract to be likely result from the breach. And then it also says such compensation is not to be given for any remote and indirect loss of damage sustained by reason of breach.
Oh yeah. So then you have you have exactly this rule in Indian contract law. So I was right in my. And you saw the economic rationale, because the economic rationale is almost striking, because otherwise you can simply pretend that you are a normal type and have no high damages and shift these costs to the other side. But in a contract relation, these costs must be internalized. They must become part of the price. And therefore, this rule gives incentive to disclose this to the other side, so it becomes part of the price. See what I mean? So, for instance, we now come to Germany. We have a civil code, and we do not have this rule. But this rule, Hadley versus Baxendale, is from the mid-1850s. And of course, the commission, the law commission, which drafted the civil code in Germany, knew this, Hadley versus Baxendale, and they fully understood the economic rationale behind it, even though they were not economists. They thought in a different way, but they understood it. And they did not include it, but they did something which was equivalent to that. So they said that if somebody concludes a contract, and if he is a high damage type, you know, that if the contract is breached and there is a damage, then his damages are extremely high. Then he must disclose it beforehand to the other side. So instead of reducing the damages, the German law imposes a duty to disclose what type you are. And if you don't disclose, then you don't get it. So now, for instance, to give a very trivial case, assume that you go into a parking on a parking place where you pay, you know, or let's say in a magazine store or in a shopping mall in the parking zone, and you pay for this, and you have your car, and in your car you have, let's say, very valuable things, let's say gold in a suitcase, 100,000 euros of gold, and then somebody comes and steals this from your car. Then you have a contract, of course, with this company, and you are entitled to damage compensation, but you are not entitled to this 100,000 to compensation of 100,000 from your valuables which you have there, because that is out of proportion. In that case, you would first have to tell the you would have to inform the owner of that the other side about your damage potential, and then the other side would certainly say, well, I don't make a contract with you, because they would go not into the business of calculating then how much your specific price for the parking is. See what I mean? Okay. Now we come to another interesting point, the theory of warranties. Yes?
When you talk about the economic rationale of foreseeable damages, would it also be that if there were penal damages being awarded, then the parties would only be incentivized to perform specifically and not undergo an efficient breach? Because if there are penal damages, then the breacher will actually prefer specific performance over the breach and having to pay penal damages. And since we know that specific performance may or may not be economically efficient, thus we have included the rule of foreseeable damages.
Well, you know, in this case here, in these cases, Hadley versus Baxendale, specific performance was in that sense not possible, because they had a contract which said that the shaft should be repaired within a particular time frame. So we have a case of delay. The performance was later, but that the performance was late was a case of breach. And then specific, you have no choice. You cannot enforce specific performance in these cases, right? Warranties. Warranties are, a specific remedy in sales law, especially in sales law. You buy something, and the quality of what you buy is below the agreed upon quality or below some particular level of quality, and the product defects, for instance, within a particular span of time. It is simply, let's say, some scrap. You bought some scrap. And then the question is, what are the remedies for that? And so the remedy could, for instance, be a money-back guarantee or a costless, a free repair, right? And the question here is, what economic function do these warranty contracts serve? What economic function do they serve? And of course, the first and perhaps most important economic function of warranties is their insurance function. Now, assume you would buy a new computer, a new laptop, for instance, and you go to some shop there, and the owner says, well, you see, I have here quite a good laptop. It costs, let's say, 50,000, no, what is it, 5,000, no, 50,000 rupees? Is that, no, yeah, could be 50,000. 50,000 rupees, okay, 50,000 rupees. This is, this is really a good product, but it is produced abroad. It is, we get these products, 10% do not work very well. You must know this. 90% work 100%, but 10% do not work very well. Now you get this, I give it to you, I sell it to you, when I sell it to you for 50,000 and it breaks down, then you get a new one. And if that breaks down, you get a new one too. And that it breaks down twice is the probability is only 1%. So you can buy. But I can also offer you to buy it for 45,000 rupees without any warranty. You get it 5,000 rupees cheaper. So what would you prefer? 50,000. Why? Because the expected value of the computer is the same. So you are risk averse. So therefore, what you buy for the 5,000 rupees here is an insurance contract. Not legally. Legally, it is, of course, not an insurance contract. But what you economically buy is you buy two contracts in one. There is a sales contract and, in addition, an insurance contract. And for both you pay, therefore you pay 50,000 rupees. Instead, if you only want the sales contract, you pay only 45,000 rupees. And because you are risk averse, you still have a net gain from this. You see? Sure. This is, of course, quite obvious. an obvious economic function of these kind of contracts.
Also, like in industrial organization case, industrial organization story, this is also used to warranty and guarantee to get rid of the multiple lemons.
Yeah. The signal, yeah, exactly. I now, this is the insurance function of warranties. But apart from the insurance function, warranties have also a signaling function. Now, the insurance function is pretty obvious of warranties, right? But what is not so obvious, at least not for lawyers, is the signaling function, which has nothing to do with the insurance function. And I want now to explain to you the signaling function. That is the following. Now, assume you have you want to buy something. Now, for instance, let's say you want to buy, let's say, a refrigerator. No, a washing machine. Let's say a washing machine. And you know little about this. You only know that there are some washing machines are good and others are not so good. And they break down and so on. But you cannot see which one is good and which is not good because they look all the same, right? They look the same. The economists, as economists, we would say that a washing machine is a so-called experience good. You know what an experience good is? Huh? No. It's a famous distinction between search goods, experience goods, and credence goods. Now, a search good is a good which, if you buy it, you know the quality. You can search the quality. So, for instance, if you go shopping in a bazaar, and everything is open there. You see the nuts, you take a nut, you smell, it's not rancid, you know the nut is good. But if it is packed, if the nuts are packed, then you cannot do that. You can neither smell nor taste, then it is an experience good. So if you buy an experience good, then you buy, as we in Germany say, the cat in the bag. You don't know what you get, right? And you only, if you use the good, by using the good, it reveals its quality. And then you learn about the good. And that is a case of that leads to consumer protection laws and so on. But the problem is now with experience goods that the producers of high quality cannot signal their quality because their goods look exactly like the goods of producer of low quality. The customer, the consumer, has no idea if the good is good or bad. And also the price, many consumers often go by the price. So if they want to buy let's say a more high quality good, they simply buy the high priced good, which is of course, sometimes that can be rational, but sometimes it's simply crazy, because the low quality then has an incentive to increase his price and pretend that his good is high quality. And then he makes some hit and run gains and then it disappears from the market. So that is a real problem for the high quality producers, that they cannot signal their high quality. They have what economists say a signaling problem. They cannot signal. And therefore, there is a tendency in such markets that the high quality products disappear from the market. Because not that there is no market for them, but because they cannot signal that they have good quality. And there is a whole branch of theory, of models in economic theory which show how this signaling problem is actually solved, or how it can be solved. Namely, basically, it can be solved if the high quality type can give a signal to the public, a credible signal, which the other type cannot imitate. See? Which the other type cannot imitate. And this signal can solve this problem and can separate the market, let's say, for low. I do not, perhaps the word low quality is not exactly what I want to say, but the market for lower quality, for instance, lower quality can be absolutely the best choice in some circumstances, and in some circumstances it's a bad choice. So for instance, assume that an elderly woman or man who lives alone, so if I would ask him, do you produce high or low quality, then he would of course say high quality. And that is the problem. So now comes the warranty comes into the play. Now assume that you have only two producers of washing machines. And both, let's say, they are both in China. And you know nothing about China. The one producer is Ying, and the other is Yang, let's say. So Ying is the high quality machine. Yeah, this is Ying. And Yang is a low quality machine. So Yang has these production costs, right? These are his production costs because it's low quality, it's cheaper to produce. Ying produces much better product, which is of course more expensive to produce. Now, these both products, both washing machines, are now marketed in India or in Germany or in the whole of the world. But Yin and Yang, you know, nobody knows them, you know. So if you ask them, they look both alike. Washing machine is a washing machine, so you really don't know. So you ask the salesman says, well, you know, the Yin is good, Yang is also good. So then the problem is that you have here, Ying has a problem of signaling his good quality. And now assume that there is some price here somewhere in the middle. Then Yang makes big profits and Ying makes losses. And there is the danger that Ying disappears from the market, right? So now comes the warranty. Ying says, well, my products are so good, you know, they almost never defect. Sometimes defect, it happens, but they do not defect. They would seldom defect. So now assume that the maximum, that this is, let's say, 5 years. Then Ying can say, well, you know, Ying says, if you buy my washing machine, I give you a guarantee for 5 years. So if it breaks down, we repair it for you for free. And Ying knows from, you know, he knows from his books and from his statistics, from his firm statistics, that this happens very seldom. And therefore that the cost of the guarantee will be low. Therefore, if he gives, now if we had a perfect market, and if this informational problem would not exist, then Yang would sell his washing machine for this price here, and Ying for this price. Now Ying gives a 5-year guarantee, and of course the costs increase, then he offers it at this price, right? And the customer said, oh, that is okay. They say he gives a 5-year guarantee. Yang gives only the, you know, the normal minimum guarantee which is required by the law. Let's say it's half a year. Now Ying can sell these products. Now Yang says, I must do the same thing. He also gives the same quality, the same guarantee, but he cannot do it for the following reason. Yang knows his quality is low. Therefore, if he gives guarantee, he has very high guarantee costs, you see? And therefore, this curve is much steeper, and his costs, including the cost for the guarantee, would now be this. Therefore, he can give only a guarantee and still be cheaper than Ying if the guarantee is, you know, lower than this. So he cannot imitate Ying with this large guarantee. If he imitates him, he gets bankrupt. So, therefore, the long warranty now gives a credible signal of Ying. He says, he does not say explicitly, but he says implicitly, I'm the guy who produces the high quality. He does not say the others do not, but I'm the guy because I give you 5 years guarantee. And the other type will never be able to imitate this. So the warranty is not only an instrument to insure the consumer, but it is also an instrument to enable the consumer to buy the goods he wants, because now the market gets separated. We will have now two types of markets. Yang will market his products with also with a guarantee, but with a low limitation period, and Ying will market it with a long limitation period. And then the problem of asymmetric information does not exist anymore, and the signaling problem is solved. See? Consumers may use a product excessively or carelessly, and then, you know, if it is guaranteed, then they impose huge costs for the producers. That is also a problem. You know, sometimes the producer can observe whether the buyer uses usually the product excessively, and then can make it part of a price. For instance, in the United States, the warranty contracts for new cars they exclude explicitly firefighter cars, police cars, ambulances, and so on. Cars which are used for these purposes, they are excluded, because one knows that an ambulance or a police car or a firefighter car will often excessively be used, with in a way which a normal user would not do it. And they have to pay higher prices, or they get less guarantee, or what, so they make different things of that. But often it is so that the car manufacturer or the seller of cars cannot differentiate between the types, Of course, the most elderly people do not use the cars as much as the younger people, but you cannot trust on that, because then the younger people will send their grandfather to buy the car, So that is a real problem. But that can also, to some extent, be solved, again by warranty. And I give you now the rationale behind that. So, take, for example, you have a car, and one car, the same car, is used, the same type of car is used, let's say, by an elderly person who uses the car once in a week when going to church on Sunday, let's say, or to the temple on Sunday, or on whatever day. And the other is a salesman who uses it 30,000 kilometers per month. Some salespeople use it that much. And so if the salesperson asks do you use that car often, then the elderly man who uses it for going to church will rightfully say, and does not lie, no, I don't use it often. And if he asks anybody else who uses it very often, then he will also say, oh no, I don't use it very often, because that would save him money, right? So you have again this problem of missing information. How is that solved? Now here, this time, we have one firm and one quality, not two firms and two qualities. We have one quality, and without warranty, this would be the price of the car. Let's say we have here a particular car without warranty. These are the costs, and in a competitive market, this is the price here. The price without warranty. Now we have here again the duration, the length of warranty. And we have here the type who uses the car seldom. So the costs of the warranty for him are very low, right? But for the other who uses it excessively, the costs of the warranty are very high. Let's say here. Now assume here, for simplicity's sake and for convenience, that we have two groups of consumers only of equal size. One subgroup is the excessive user, the other is the less than average user. Then if this problem of asymmetric information cannot be solved, then you get here some price in the middle. Everybody pays this price for the warranty, right? This is, of course, inefficient. It is also unfair. It's unfair and inefficient because now the excessive users get a lower price than what the cost they produce are. They are subsidized, cross-subsidized by the others. And the others who use it only little, they pay a higher price and have to subsidize the others who overuse the car. That is certainly not the best solution. Now, one possibility is now that the company asks itself, what can we do that the customers get an incentive to reveal their type? Can we do something that the customers reveal their type, and then we can deal with, then we can calculate the right prices and have the efficient prices and charge the customers with the high risk, with a high cost, and with the low risk, with the low cost. And yes, there exists a mechanism to guarantee this. Now, assume that the car seller now offers two different warranties. He says, okay, you buy the car, you can get the car with a 5-year warranty, then it costs you 40,000 euros, let's say. You get 5 years, full package. You are fully insured. 5 years, 40,000. Or you can also get the same car for 35,000, but get only 2 years, right? So they offer one thing here. This is, let's say, 40,000, offer this. And they offer here this long, and they offer another warranty, which is here. And this is now interesting then, because this offer will be the high type, the high risk type will accept this offer, because he knows that there is a huge, very high probability that he will make use of the warranty, and therefore it is profitable for him to be fully insured for a long period. But the other one knows that the probability, if he uses the car once in a week, of having having to use the warranty is very low. So if he can save 5,000 euros, then he will buy a cheaper car, because he says that the risk is not worth 3,000, to pay 3,000. And therefore, what we get here, we get four possibilities. We have this contract here, and this here, and this here. But this here is not profitable, or not utility increasing. And this here is also not utility increasing. This here is, so he offers the car for 40, or he offers the car with 2 for 35. So we have this, and this is preferred by the low risk type, and this is preferred by the high risk type. Okay? And therefore, by this way, you get an incentive for this time for the buyers to not to conceal but to reveal their types. And that is what insurance companies very often do. And therefore, what you can see is that warranties have a very fundamental function in sales law. They insure the consumer, they give signals to the consumer as to who is the high quality and low quality producer, and they signal to the producer who is the high risk type consumer and who is the low risk type consumer. These are the functions of the warranties in contract law.